welcome back to Gold Scratch. So this is something quite a bit different than our usual videos. From time to time you hear me talk about, I work for Trevor Culver Motorsports, and we never had Trevor Culver actually with us, so Trevor Culver with us today. He's just dropping his engine off for some winter maintenance. We're going to do leak down tests, compression tests, a few other tests, diagnostic tests, and change the valve spring. So you had to take the engine out for another issue, repair the oil pan, and so while it's out, it's a lot easier to do it here than in the car. So we also talk about how the rules work, and Trevor actually won the championship in Super Stock at Delaware Speedway last year. 7 out of 11 races, and this is a 602 crate engine. You've heard him talk about 602 crate engines. The other one's a 604, which is used in Pro Late model. This is a Super Stock engine, and it's a sealed engine. So just turn it over to Trevor. We haven't practiced this at all. We just got him captive here, so we've got to take advantage of it. Talk about how a sealed engine works, how the rules work, and what you can do and what you can't do, and why we're so limited in basically what we can do other than maintenance. So go ahead, Trev.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me out. Yeah, so this engine, it's a 602 Chevy crate engine. So these Chevy crate engines, they've got factory seals that if you zoom in, you can see there's actually a Chevy logo there, right? So when GM builds these engines in the factory, they factory seal them. And when the tech inspectors are looking over these motors, instead of a typical head bolt like that or some of the other bolts here, they have these seals which show they've been sealed in the factory to know that no one has touched this motor. They're factory sealed. And then on top of that, they now make us get a seal from the APC series. They seal these motors because they say, hey, yep, we've seen videos and tricks on how you guys can get these out and get look-alike replacement seals in there, because everyone has to cheat somewhere, so they always try and make sure that there's a double net, double safety in there to make sure that we aren't cheating, and we appreciate that. We want to make sure we're the best team out there with the best team, the best driver, the best car, and if we're up against a competitor that has an illegal motor or has an advantage that's not fair, then that's kind of defeats the whole purpose of it. So it's good how they seal these the way they do. So in our class, there's 2 different packages you can do with crate engines. So you can have a factory sealed crate engine that gets red seal, and it gets sealed as soon as it comes from GM. You can only buy them from one dealership now, Humberview Parts. It used to be wherever, but now you have to buy it from Humberview Parts. They get sealed right there at Humberview before you even get in your hands, so they know that you can't touch that motor. The other option, one of these stock motors, you can take it to, I believe there's 3 engine builders that can work on these motors, and they can rebuild the motors and take them to a certain spec that they have in the rule book. And when they rebuild and blueprint those motors, they then get a seal on them, but they're blue seal. So blue seal to red seal, the difference is, like I say, one's factory, GM builds it in the factory and it gets sealed right away. The blue seal is an engine builder basically takes it apart, puts it back together, or if it's been used a couple of years, right, takes it apart and puts new rings in it. What else do they do?
Well, it's very limited. All you can do is bore at 5 thousandths of an inch. Typically, any engine we bore at 30 thousandths minimum. 5 thousandths, you can only take a couple thousandths off the deck. It's very limited, and if someone wants to invest in going from a red to blue seal, they might get 10 or 20 horsepower.
Yeah,
if they're really good at it, they might get 10 or 20 horsepower. Sometimes engines have to be rebuilt just because they're worn out.
Right.
But when this series started, guys were buying brand new engines, putting them on the dyno, putting a bunch of fuel through them to break them in, take them apart, and rebuild them to the specs to get that 10 or 20 horsepower just for the little advantage. A lot of money spent and that's what happens with rules. And then they got the other thing that Trevor, you can mention, Trevor, there's a weight break issue with you go to a
Yes,
fixed
so
right?
so that was the other part of that. So with running this Red Seal crate engine, my car with the driver in it has to weigh 3,000 pounds at the end of the race. With the Blue Seal that's got rebuilt and has that 10 to 20 horsepower, you have to add 25 pounds of total weight. So 25 pounds doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're running a 35 or 50 lap race, you're carrying that weight for however many extra laps, and you're putting that much extra stress on your tires. So it can definitely make a bit of a difference. Originally, when they started rebuilding those crate engines, we got one rebuilt years ago, and I think it made around 360 horsepower, 400 foot-pounds of torque. Before, at that time, the crate engines were only making 345, 350, so it was a decent advantage. Now you can get these, they come out of the box. I've heard of lots of them at 360 or 363. So they, whatever, I'm not sure what component GM changed when they made these, but they did something a little different. And these stock engines were basically making as much as the rebuilt motors. So our thought when we saw that on the dyno a couple years ago, why not run the stock factory one that has less laps on it, and we can run 25 pounds lighter? So that's the way we've went the last couple of years, and that's what we've been running and had success with.
Yeah, we actually dynoed a rebuilt engine with an untouched engine. I can't tell the exact numbers, but it wasn't very much.
They were, one was better by, the rebuilt one had 3 more horsepower, and the stock one had 2 more foot-pounds of torque. So, I mean, they're neck and neck, and people argue sometimes you want more torque anyways, because that's what helps you get out of the corner, right? So, yeah, the other one had more top-end horsepower. So, like we talked about, it made sense for us to go with the motor that allows the car to be a little bit lighter, and that seemed to work.
You won 7 races out of 11. That's pretty good stuff. So Trevor showing you the seals on the intake manifold. The oil pan is sealed the same way. The front timing cover is sealed the same way. And the heads are sealed the same way. There's the numbers. There's the seals on the heads as well.
Yep.
Same thing. So the only thing I can take out of this engine is the valve covers. So we are allowed to do that. And we will change. One of the weak links of these engines is valve springs. And so we change valve springs pretty regularly. And since it's out of the car, easy to do leak down and compression tests, check the health of the engine, and if those numbers are as good as they are, we have a record right back from the day it was born. We'll put it back in the car. And so it takes 3 things to win a race. You got to have lots of power. That's nice to have. And the difference, once again, there's not much we can do. You need a car that can get around the corners, and you need a wheelman, and we got all 3 of them. So that's what counted for the success of Colbert Motorsports last year. So pretty fun year. We're looking forward to another one, and got high expectations. I don't know how we're going to outdo last year. It's going to be tough.
Well, we're sure going to try. It's funny. Alan's been part of our racing team and my racing career for many years here, and I'm not sure if at the end of every year he says this to try and get me fired up or whatever, but after a good year he says, you know what, you've done really good, and you've got the very most you've got out of that car, like kudos to you. And every time he says that to me, I take that as a challenge where, oh no, we can do a little bit better, we can find more, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep digging. We know we had an amazing year last year, but we know there's a stacked field of competition that we race against, and as great as it is to win the championship last year, now I've got a bullseye on my back for everyone wanting to knock me off the throne, which is a big compliment, and we're going to do our best to make sure that doesn't happen, and we try and go for back-to-back championships. So big thanks to Gold's Garage here with all their help with this part that they can do. Like Alan said, the compression and the leak down test, just to make us feel a little better going into the season, that we know we've got good numbers, and we finished the year with a fast car, and if all these numbers look good, then we're going to bolt it back in and try and go start the season how we ended off the season in Victory Lane.
Okay, so there's the front of it, by the way. Can I turn around?
Yeah,
the front
sure
of
you
it?
can.
So a little bit different than the back of it. So it's steel crated. And by the way, these engines, this we didn't mention. So they're it's a crate engine. So all it is the hypertectic pistons. It's 4-bolt mains, cast iron crankshaft, Vortec heads, which is one of the reasons that they work. And a very, very mild camshaft. I haven't built an engine in the last 30 inches that had a milder camshaft than this one. So that just shows you how mild it is. And it's amazing how much power they make and how well they perform. I'm not going to tell you what RPM we're going because, but I keep telling him you can't do that, but he does it anyway and we get away with it. A couple of things we're going to do. We're going to do a leak down test and a compression test, which are two diagnostic tests that tell us a lot about the health of the engine. And so it's a little change in thinking, and even go back to my corporate days. Most maintenance was time-based, so you changed components or parts every 2 weeks or every so many hours or miles or whatever. If you look on the manual of your car, it might say you change the oil every 6,000 miles, you change the air filter every 12,000, whatever. That's time-based maintenance. So the modern way is condition-based maintenance, because in industry it works because you save a lot of money because you don't change stuff for nothing just because you think it should be changed. You change it based on the condition. So the next thing you need to know is, what is the condition? So two important checks to determine condition. We're going to just show you leak down test and a compression test, as I said. What does that tell you? It tells you how well your cylinder is sealed. So if your rings were in bad shape, or your cylinder bore was scratched up, or your pistons were damaged, or your valves were not seating properly, your leak down numbers are not going to be good, and your compression numbers are not going to be good. They're both good tests. Leak down is less common because most people don't have the resources to do a leak down. Compression test, that's a simple device you can buy at any auto parts store for, I'm sure, $30 or $40 at the most to do a compression test, and that's a great diagnostic check of the condition of your engine. If you got good compression, you've probably got an engine that's in pretty good shape. So a leak down is a little better because compression measures dynamic pressure as the piston's coming up, whereas a leak down is static. It just measures how much leak down is. This tester here, which we're going to do a test for you, it just measures how much air is escaping past your piston rings or past your valves. And the next thing you can determine if you have a leak down in excess of what you want or expect, where is it going? So you can actually determine if it's going past the piston rings, and you can listen into the intake valve or the exhaust valve and actually see where the leakage is occurring. And that's one of the things I did with Paul's engine. I put his heads on. We thought the heads were going to be almost good to go. I just used a gasket, and I did a leak down test on them before I even put them on the engine, and they were pretty good, but we wanted to do this engine right, so we decided we could make it better. So let's go back to the concept of condition based. So this engine's had 3 full seasons of racing. It's a crate engine. Trevor described it in the previous video. It's called the CT350, and you can buy it right from GM in the GM Performance Catalog, and if you Google CT350. So it's pretty much the standard in superstock racing all over the country, Canada and the US, most places. And the CT400 is then a step higher engine. You can buy that as well, and that's the standard in pro late model racing, so compared to superstock racing. The difference is nominally these are 350 horse. Nominally the CT400, the 400 stands for 400 horsepower, although they dyno more than 400. They all dyno more than 400 horsepower. GM was kind of sandbagging us on that. And if you're a Ford guy, by the way, there is a Ford version of both those engines that race against us. in super stock and pro late model. Unfortunately for you Mopar guys, there is no Mopar engine in those classes anymore. I don't think anyway, as far as I know anyway. So since we got it here, yesterday I didn't have a camera available. I changed all the valve springs. That is one issue with these engines. The valve springs that are in it, I haven't got one in my hand. I'll show it in the next clip. I actually use Trevor's old valve springs when I'm starting one of my engines up, because it's nice and easy on the camshaft. They're only 80 pounds on the seat and 200 pounds all fully open. So they're a nice soft valve spring, and they're great for breaking in new camshafts. And because we change valve springs pretty often, can't tell you how often, but I've got a lot of old valve springs to work with. So these engines are pretty amazing. They use the Vortec heads, and I got to make sure I get the right version of them. 062. They're the 062 castings. Sorry. So there's a long casting number, 062. There's 2 or 3 Vortec casting numbers that are common. They're the 062 heads. It actually has a cast iron crankshaft. It's got the 880 block, which is originally a roller block, a one-piece rear main seal block, 880 block. Cast iron crankshaft as well. They will be the powder metallurgy connecting rods. And you buy them, as Trevor described, this engine is completely sealed. The only thing we can take off this engine is the valve cover. And the cylinder heads, the intake manifold, the timing cover, the oil pan is all sealed, and there's only 3 authorized builders in province of Ontario, Canada, and that's pretty common in other places as well, that are authorized by the league to work on these engines, and they're certified, and their reputation is on the line. If any of their engines ever get caught illegal, they're not going to be authorized very long. So we're going to show a leak down and compression test. And if you can handle it, I got another war story for you that you think you might find interesting. So first of all, for a leak down test, yesterday I actually did all the leak down. So what I did, I had to take all the rocker arms off anyway. I backed all the rocker arms off, took them right off the engine. Now all the valves are closed, so I don't have to worry about where the cylinder is because the valves are closed. In this case, the valves rocker arms are back on. So I put it we're at number 6, number 1 on the damper, on the harmonic balancer. Number 1 and 6 are at the top at the same time, and I know because I feel these 2 rocker arms are not tight here. So number 6 is firing, so I need those valves closed, obviously, to do a leak down test. And the other thing I will show you when I remove it, what's going to want to happen when I put air in the cylinder, it's going to want to rotate. So we have to use a device to lock the flywheel from turning in order to be able to take the leak down test. So you've heard me talk about leak downs a lot. I do leak downs on every engine that I do, diagnostic after they're broken in, and that all gives me information on how well we got the engine sealed. So we're starting with 100 psi of compressed air connected to my air compressor. We zero the dial on the leak down tester like that, and I've got my connection hose in number 6 cylinder, and we just connect it up. The engine cannot turn, and that gives me my leak down number. You probably can't see it from there. That's okay. It's a good number, so we're happy with that. So I would do that with every cylinder, every cylinder engine, and send Trevor a report so he knows the condition of his engine. And next we're going to leave that right there, and we're going to do a compression test. Might as well use the same cylinder. So this device comes out. I gotta take my little claw that's jamming the flywheel from turning, and I can show you what it looks like. That's what it looks like. It just jams bolts to your back of where the bell housing bolts on the engine, and jams the flywheel so that it cannot turn. because when you put your press there, the engine is going to want to turn, right? So that's all that does. Now, if you're trying to do a leak down in a car, if it's a standard transmission car and you put the car in gear, you put your foot on the brake, that'll stop the engine from turning. Or if you got the piston exactly at top dead center, there's no rotational force. The force goes right through the center line of the piston, center line of the crankshaft and the rod, and there is no rotational force. But it's tricky to do that. So in my case, once again, all the rocker arms off, all the valves are closed, so that was not an issue. So that's leak down. Now we'll do compression. And for compression, it's the opposite. We have to turn the engine. Leak down, you don't want the engine to turn. So for a compression test, we have to turn it. There we go. So obviously, we're going to demonstrate one cylinder. We have checked them all. You need power to do that. Switch on and that's compression. So now I know by doing that every cylinder in the engine with the leak down and compression numbers are, and that helps us decide. That's condition based. Now we know the condition of the engine, and I can tell you right now, based on the results that we got, even though this engine's got 3 years of use. So we raced 11 races last year. We probably tested as many laps as that. So about 100 laps a race. By the time you get practice and qualifying and caution laps and race laps, at least 100 laps a race, that's 1,100. Pretty much times two, let's say 2,000 laps a year, 6,000 laps on a half-mile track, where we are. This is not any secret, by the way. The competitor seeing the inside of your race engine usually is a no-no, but since these engines are all the same, there's nothing to hide here. So the limitation of the rules is you have to use a 6,000 RPM chip in your ignition, and we hit the chip all the time and every lap, and so do all our competitors. So this engine's running 6,000 RPM. That's no trade secret because everybody does the same thing every race. And in fact, there's some other series, the APC Traveling Series, the rule is actually 6,200 RPM. If you look at the GM manual, I think it says do not exceed 5,500 RPM. No one pays any attention to that. And so why did we do that? Because the horsepower will be dropping off once you get past 5,000 RPM, because you have you have pretty much an underpowered car, 360 horsepower on a half-mile track with a 3,000-pound car. You're coming out of the corner, getting that RPM up, coming out of the corner is where races are won and lost. And so we do it, so does everybody else. It's no trade secret. We all gear it to hit the chip all the time. And the track rules are well enforced. That chip is checked on a computer every week to make sure that it is a 6,000 RPM chip. So those are the diagnostic checks. So based on what I just told you, 3 seasons of racing, probably 6,000 laps, 6,000 RPM every lap, this engine is good to go. It does not need to be rebuilt, and it would be a waste of money and time. Trevor won 11 races, including the last 3 or 4 of the season with this engine just the way it is. So obviously it's making good power. The other diagnostic check is if you can get good lap times, obviously. So I do have a little war story. So for those who can handle a war story, a couple4 years ago, Trevor was in a race, and we were actually, I think, in Peterborough, Ontario, which is like 4 or 5 hours from here anyway, something like that. And he was running up front in the top 3, and all of a sudden we could hear him going by our pit, and I could tell he had a miss, a pretty severe miss, coming out of the engine. And Trevor, you just got to keep on going because nothing you can do about it now. He actually finished the race. I'm pretty sure he was in the top 5 anyways, even with that. And so what happened? So take the valve cover off. It actually broke a push rod. So there's not one of his push rods. This is another. This is a push rod. So the push rods that come in, it got the little ball on the top. It actually broke off. The rocker arm fell off. And so what happens is there's nothing to hold your valve lifter. It's a flat tappet valve lifter. Okay. So the camshaft launches the valve lifter out of the hole. So it's now bouncing around in your lifter valley on its own for the duration of the race. So it's all banged up. So I looked at that and I said, Trev, you got to take it back to the engine builder because I can't take the engine apart any further than this. And therefore, you know, I can't break the seals. If you break these seals, you got to get them resealed by these guys. And so you just basically cannot take it apart yourself, period. So he did that, and the engine builder, Gary Leach Racing Performance in Windsor, I'll mention him, actually went with a camera or a light down in the lifter valley. If you look at those, the way these Vortec heads are, they got a big hole every here and there. You actually fish that valve lifter out, put a new valve lifter in its place, reset the rocker arm, and the engine was good to go. And I was actually embarrassed when I found that out. I wasn't there when he did it. I could have done that, obviously, because I could take the valve cover off, right? I just never thought that you could do that. And so kudos to him for doing that. He saved Trevor a lot. He would have had to take that engine completely, disassemble it. Didn't have to do that. Put it back together, and he went out and won races with it, just like that. So that's my war story for today. Yeah, please like and subscribe. Hope you found that interesting. CT350, GM Performance Catalog CT400. So I know the CT400, when we raced Pro Late Model here for a few years ago, that is the same as the ZZ6. The only difference is, obviously, if you're racing, we use racing valve covers and a racing oil pan. The oil pan's different because you're turning left all the time, and the valve covers are different. Otherwise, it's basically the same engine. So hope you found that interesting. A little different. It's not about, I don't build these engines, I just maintain them, and that's all I'm here for today. And this engine is going back in the car, and it's going to be fine. No video is complete until you hear it running with open headers, so we're going to start up just for a few seconds for you and let it run. And actually, I got to run it for an extended period of time. We want to make sure before it goes in the car that there's no leaks and everything's good, so when the season starts, he doesn't have to worry about the motor. So, and my neighbors haven't heard a good healthy V8 running with open headers for a long time, so we're going to give them a treat today. So let's see what it sounds like. Done a tip of the day for a while, so Alec remind me of that. So in a previous video, I forget what the discussion was. Someone who's watching the video and commenting said, you know, check your machinery's handbook for the right answer. Well, that is a machinery's handbook. That is basically the engineer's Bible, and not just engineers, any mechanical person that wants to get deep into stuff. And it looks like a Bible. And that's, when I was going to college, this was our go-to manual. Don't forget, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have lots of ways to check stuff like we have now. This was the ultimate source. And in this book is pretty much everything to do with anything mechanical, right from tap drill sizes, gear sizes, stress calculations, trigonometry, if you want to get into stuff like that, It's pretty cool, and you know, even though I did use it, I probably looked at maybe 10% of the pages in my lifetime. There's just so much here that no one person could ever use all of it, but it is a pretty cool reference book. So I was inspired by that person that commented on my channel. I went out and bought a brand new one. I did have one in my earlier life, and somewhere along the way it got misplaced. So I've got a new one, and I will use it when I get an opportunity. So hope you found that stuff about Trevor's 602 crate engine interesting. It's a little different than our normal stuff. Thank you for watching Gold's Garage.